Okay, there we go. All right. Good morning. My name is Andrew Chance, and the title of my presentation today is the IPCC and the climate change field. It's time to go back to the roots. Climate is all around us. It affects us all. It is the field that studies Earth's atmospheric conditions over a long period of time. Since climate is important, it is even more important to understand how our Earth's climate is changing. Therefore, the climate field is an immensely important field for the future of the human race. Unfortunately, the climate change field, primarily led by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is not studying climate change with the scientific methodology. Here's why. Before I start, I want to give you some key definitions so you can understand my argument to a greater extent. The first definition I'll give you guys today is the scientific method. The scientific method is the method of testing and analysis which has been used for hundreds of years by scientists with reliable results. The strength of the scientific method is repeatability, since it follows a strict set of steps and documentation which allows experiments to be easily repeated. My second definition I'll introduce you guys to today is the post-normal method. The post-normal method, on the other hand, is a new method of testing and analysis which was created with the sole purpose of replacing the scientific method as the sole means of testing and analysis used in the scientific field. It relies on, quote, concrete experience, end quote, over so-called, quote, abstract principles, end quote. In other words, it allows researchers to skip steps and reach conclusions faster despite inaccuracies and inconclusive conclusions that may occur. The adoption of the post-normal method was adopted by the climate change field primarily because, quote, a highly complex problem such as climate change has a lot of uncertainties, end quote, which warrant complex solutions. In result, the climate change field has abandoned the reliable scientific method and in turn adopted the unreliable post-normal method, which has resulted in many non-scientific and unreliable publications by both the IPCC and the climate change field as a whole. Another result of the adoption of the post-normal method is that the climate change field led by the IPCC is now heavily politicized and biased. The post-normal method has directly led to a deadly spiral called amplification bias, which is when biased research is supported by biased funding, which then is published by news sources, which then repeats this cycle as more people get awareness of this research that is published. I will conclude my speech today with an analogy of what I believe is happening right now in the IPCC and the climate change field. Imagine you own a barn. Like any standard barn, it is held up by 4 reliable pillars. Imagine you've recently seen an advertisement for a new kind of pillar, which is advertised to be cheaper and is supposed to be stronger. Sadly, after you installed the new pillars, you instead notice that the 4 new pillars holding up the barn are, in reality, much more unstable than the old ones, even becoming, in some parts, detached from the roof of the barn as a whole. What would you do as a homeowner? The smart decision would be to replace the unsafe new pillars with the old reliable pillar material. But suppose you instead decide that you are going to nail it into the roof with a few more nails. This is at most a temporary fix. Eventually, the barn will become unsafe and may possibly even collapse. This is what is happening right now in the IPCC and the climate change field. The post-normal method has resulted in biased and flawed research. Instead of fixing this problem and reverting to the scientific method, which would equate to replacing the bad new pillars with the reliable old pillars, the climate change field led by the IPCC has doubled down on the post-normal method, Not only that, but biased government funding has, quote unquote, nailed it into the roof. And in turn, the climate change field and the IPCC is losing valuable credibility. This approach desperately needs to change. The IPCC and the climate change field needs to revert back to the old pillars. Thank you, and I'll open this up to questions.